Okay, Cerydra leaks are out, and we are going to go over her kit, how well she works with Phainon, how well she works as a generalist Harmony support, and just overall everything you need to know about Cerydra's version 1 beta. So these are her base stats. She actually has higher base attack than Phainon, funny enough. She has 99 base speed, but that won't be a problem for her, as you'll see. And she has an energy cost of 130, but this also won't be a problem for her, as you'll see. As for what Cerydra does, her basic attack is a very basic attack. It just does wind damage to one enemy. Cerydra's skill is where things get interesting. So Cerydra's skill grants military merit to one designated ally character, and it gives Cerydra 1 point of charge. Maximum charge is 8 points. So this, her skill on its own, actually doesn't do anything, which is kind of funny. All her skill does is it grants this military merit status to an ally. It doesn't actually do anything else. But when the charge reaches 6 points, and we will see how she gets charge later, when the charge reaches 6 points, then military merit upgrades to nobility, which is basically just a fancier name for the effect. Essentially, once Cerydra consumes 6 points of her charge, the character with her skill buff on them will gain crit damage for their skill, and the next time they use their skill, they will double up and use their skill again. Think of it like a free Anaxa skill. Anaxa immediately uses an additional usage of a skill after his first skill. Cerydra allows anyone to do the same thing Anaxa does with his skill one time when she reaches 6 charge. Cerydra's ultimate is an AoE wind damage ability. It gives her 2 charge for her skill, and if there are no characters under the status effect of her skill, then she will prioritize giving the military merit status to the character positioned first in the team lineup. Generally, this won't matter because you'll always have a target affected by her skill already. Finally, we get to Cerydra's talent, and this is how she gains her stacks of charge. So first off, characters who are under the military merit status of Cerydra's skill gain attack equal to 24% of Cerydra's attack. This is not a 24% attack buff. This is an attack buff equal to 24% of Cerydra's attack. So it actually ends up being around 1000 attack, similar to Robin's attack buff, but only for one character. Now, as for how Cerydra gains stacks of charge, when the character under the status of her skill uses their basic attack or skill, Cerydra gains 1 charge. So every time Phainon basic attacks or skills, Cerydra will gain 1 stack of charge. It should be noted that when the character uses the additional skill, like Anaxa's additional skill, that will not give 1 stack for her charge. Cerydra's technique is actually very important. When Cerydra uses her technique, she will immediately cast her skill on the character that you used to enter the battle with. So if you use Cerydra's technique, and then you swap to Phainon, and you enter battle with Phainon's technique, Cerydra will automatically cast her skill on Phainon without consuming a skill point. This is super important because it gives Cerydra the energy as if she cast her skill without consuming a skill point. It's the exact same as Ruan Mei's technique. These are Cerydra's stat boosts. As you can see, she gets a lot of offensive stat boosts. As for Cerydra's major traces, she gets a lot of offensive stat boosts here as well. When Cerydra's attack is greater than 2000, for every 100 attack exceeded, increases this unit's crit damage by 18%, up to a maximum of 360%. As you can see, that's a pretty massive crit damage boost for Cerydra. And her second major trace leans into this even more by giving her 100% crit rate just at a baseline without needing to do anything. So this will impact the damage of Cerydra's ultimate a lot. I will say I find it a little strange that her kit incentivizes her ultimate to do damage, even though she's made to be primarily used in a Phainon hypercarry team where she isn't getting any other buffs aside from her own self buffs, but it is what it is. Additionally, when the character affected by her skill status, military merit, uses their ultimate for the first time, Cerydra gains 1 additional point of charge. This effect can only be triggered once per battle. For her third major trace, when she uses a skill, she increases the speed of herself and the target affected by her skill by 20 for 3 turns. Additionally, when a character affected by her skill uses their basic attack or skill, Cerydra will generate 5 energy. So you're probably wondering, is Cerydra only for Phainon? Not exactly. The main thing Cerydra provides is she allows skill-based DPS characters to get an additional usage of their skill for free every time she reaches 6 points of charge. So technically, Cerydra will be great with any DPS who focuses on using their skill. Although she buffs attack, so she isn't doing much for HP-based damage dealers like Mighty and Jingliu, so that's a little unfortunate. But characters like Anaxa can definitely get a lot of use out of her, and even characters like Saber and Archer, although I will need more hands-on testing to see how well she does with them, compared to their current options. So for the time being, her best DPS characters would be Phainon and Anaxa. This is what Cerydra's rotation will look like with Phainon in order to get her charges so that he can get a double meteor. Thanks to Cerydra giving 20 speed to Phainon, Phainon can actually run a -1 speed setup with Sunday and Branya without requiring speed boots. This gives Phainon 3 turns, which gives Cerydra 3 stacks of her charge. Cerydra's technique automatically gives her 1 stack for her charge because it automatically casts her skill, and then Cerydra gets 2 stacks of her charge from her own ultimate and 1 stack of her charge from Phainon's ultimate, bringing her to 7 charge during Phainon's ultimate, which immediately allows Phainon to do a double meteor on his first turn in his ultimate. As you can probably guess, giving Phainon a double meteor is very, very strong. And over the course of Phainon's turns in his ultimate, ultimate, Cerydra will end up giving him 2 extra meteors that he wouldn't have gotten without her. He goes from 3 meteors in his ultimate to 5 meteors with Cerydra. This is assuming Phainon's worst case scenario in single target. Furthermore, Cerydra enables the -1 setup with Sunday and Bronya while keeping Phainon on attack boots. And she heavily incentivizes this rotation in order to make use of her speed buff. This means, yes, I know, all of you who farmed hyperspeed setups for your Sunday and Bronya, you'll probably need to lower their speed builds if you're going to run them with Cerydra. As for other buffs that Cerydra gives, she gives roughly 72% crit damage only on the double meteor and around 1000 attack for Phainon. So, what does this all mean for Cerydra's playstyle and how she affects Phainon's playstyle? First off, we've already covered how she changes Phainon's rotation to want to run a -1 speed setup with Sunday and Bronya. Essentially, you would run Phainon on attack boots, but he would still manage to be faster than Sunday and Bronya thanks to Cerydra's 20 speed buff. Run Sunday on 134 speed and Bronya on 133 speed, or they can be a little higher as long as your Phainon is still ahead of them. This allows Phainon to take a turn, and then Sunday to give him another turn, and then Bronya to give him yet another turn, to perfectly give him enough core flame stacks to ult. As for how this affects Phainon in his ultimate, running Sunday and Bronya at this low of speed means that Sunday and Bronya will not make it back into the 0 cycle after Phainon exits his first ultimate. This means Cerydra is heavily incentivizing Phainon to clear within his first ultimate. She incentivizes this even further by forcing Phainon to double meteor in the first wave, thus making him clear the first wave faster. As a result, Phainon enters wave 2 with way more actions, which makes it even more impossible for Sunday and Bronya to re-enter the 0 cycle after he exits his first ultimate. Meaning if Phainon needs to exit his first ultimate, the chances of 0 cycling are nigh impossible. He needs to clear in one ultimate in order to 0 cycle now, because of how Cerydra affects his rotations. Let's cover Cerydra's energy rotation. She starts with 65 out of 130 energy at the start of the battle. Phainon's technique obviously gives her 25, which brings her to 90, and then her own technique gives her a free cast of her skill at the cost of no skill points, which is basically a free 30 energy for herself, already bringing her to 120 energy at the start of battle. All she needs is one basic attack to fully fill up her energy, and she technically doesn't even need that because of her trace that gives her energy whenever the ally affected by her skill uses their basic attack or skill. But in Cerydra rotations with Phainon, we will be assuming that she's just using a basic attack, which is more than enough to give her enough energy for a turn 1 ultimate, and this is with an attack rope. This means that Cerydra has enough energy to ult on turn 1 with the basic attack and with an attack rope. She does not need an energy rope, and she does not need to cast her skill. But then you may ask, if she's not casting her skill, will Phainon get enough core flame stacks for his ultimate? Well, let's look at the rotation. Phainon starts with 1 stack at the start of battle thanks to his major trace. Cerydra's basic attack and ult gives no stacks for Phainon. Phainon moves before Sunday thanks to Cerydra's speed buff, bringing him to 3 stacks with his skill. Sunday uses his skill and ult on Phainon, which brings us to 6 stacks, which brings Phainon back up for another skill, which brings him to 8 stacks. Then Bronya goes with her skill and ult, which brings Phainon to 10 stacks. And obviously, Bronya's action advance lets Phainon do another skill for the full 12 stacks. Not to mention, Cerydra's technique at the start of battle gives 1 stack because it acts as a free cast of her skill, for 13 total stacks on Phainon. As you can see, Phainon's core flame stack generation is perfectly fine with Cerydra opening with a basic attack. The fact that she allows Phainon to go before Sunday with attack boots gives Phainon enough core flame stacks to reach his ultimate, thanks to the fact that it enables him to take an extra turn before Sunday. And as you can probably guess, the SP economy actually isn't too bad thanks to Cerydra opening with a basic attack. Phainon's technique gives us +1 SP, and then Cerydra's basic attack brings us to 5. So the rotation of Phainon's skill into Sunday's skill, into Phainon's skill, into Bronya's skill, into Phainon's skill brings us to exactly 0 SP. So we have just enough SP to fuel the full rotation. And as we discussed earlier, in an ideal Cerydra rotation, the fight won't last beyond Phainon's first ultimate. So going to 0 SP isn't too big of a deal. But in case you do end up in a situation where you need to start stacking up a second ultimate, there are options to get more SP, such as Sunday's Light Cone, Bronya's Light Cone, Cerydra's Light Cone, or Bronya's E1. As for investment priority, let's look at her Eidolons versus her Light Cone. Cerydra's E1 allows the target affected by her skill to ignore 15% of the enemy's defense. And when the target activates her additional skill effect, they ignore an additional 18% of the target's defense, for a total 33% defense ignore when activating Cerydra's additional skill effect. Her E2 is a basic 40% damage bonus, and it increases her own damage. Her E4 increases the damage multiplier of her ultimate, so as you can see, a lot of her Eidolons are about her own personal damage. And for her E6, Cerydra gives 20% all-type res pen to the target affected by her skill, and she also gives 20% all-type res pen to herself. She will also deal additional damage every time the ally affected by her skill attacks the target. Think of it like Robin's ultimate's additional damage. As for Cerydra's Light Cone, it gives her a huge amount of attack percent with the really high base attack stat. It also lets her ultimate recover 1 skill point, but as we covered earlier in the SP rotation, Phainon Phainon teams aren't really struggling with skill points because Cerydra can open with a basic attack, but the skill point is still nice if you end up needing a second rotation. Additionally, when she uses her skill on an ally character, which can trigger via her technique, she increases the damage dealt by the target's skill by 54%. So should you pull her E1 or her light cone? While her light cone increases her attack buff and it gives a damage percent buff and it can ease up the skill point economy, I would say Cerydra's E1 is more beneficial because of what a unique buff defense ignore is for Phainon, and it will stack with the defense ignore on Phainon's light cone. Here is a summarized list of Cerydra's pros and cons for Phainon. In short, Cerydra is a cheaper Phainon E2. She gives him 2 extra meteors at a baseline, which is pretty crazy, and is essentially what his E2 did. She gives a conditional 72% crit damage on his double meteor. She gives upwards of 1000 attack, which is similar to what Robin gives. She lets Phainon play a -1 speed rotation with Sunday while keeping Phainon on attack boots. She's completely SP positive because her technique starts her off with her skill, meaning she's free to basic attack for energy. Her technique gives 1 stack for Phainon's ultimate, and then she essentially gives Phainon 2 extra stacks because her speed buff allows Phainon to move before Sunday, thus giving him an extra skill. And last but not least, she's very easy to build, and she makes the build on your other supports much easier by incentivizing them to run lower speed. As for her cons, her actual buffs are oversaturated. She gives crit damage and attack, which are buffs that Phainon already gives himself in spades. It would have been nice if she gave more unique buffs, such as defense ignore or res pen, but it's clear to me that her buffs were balanced around the fact that she's giving Phainon 2 extra meteors. That's a lot of extra damage that's not coming from any stat buffs. Additionally, she has a very restrictive playstyle. She requires Phainon to 0 cycle in 1 ultimate, and the second Phainon isn't able to do that, the playstyle is going to run into some issues. Furthermore, she heavily incentivizes the -1 speed setup with Sunday and Branya. So you could view that as her making the team building even more restrictive, on top of requiring Phainon to clear in 1 ultimate. Overall, I think Cerydra is a really strong buff for Phainon. The 2 extra meteors is insane all on its own, and the fact that she's easy to build, gives decent buffs, even if they are oversaturated, and is just very easy to play, being very comfortable in terms of her SP, energy generation, and stack generation for Phainon, makes her a really good teammate for him. Probably his best in slot, just thanks to those 2 extra meteors alone. Of course, she does come with her downsides, mainly the restrictive playstyle, but overall, I would definitely still consider getting her if you want your Phainon to perform to his highest potential. And here is an early build guide for Cerydra. As you can see, she just wants to stack as much attack as possible because her attack buff is based on her own attack. She has no good 4-piece sets, so you'll just run a 2-piece attack, 2-piece attack, just like Robin does. She uses an attack chest, attack boots because she gets the 20 speed buff from her own skill, so she doesn't need speed boots, an attack orb, and an attack rope because she gets enough energy even without energy rope. Run Lushaka or Broken Keel planners on her just to further buff your DPS. As for light cone options, if you're not gonna pull for her signature light cone, then she's getting a new light cone in the 3.5 event, which is tailor-made for her. It's essentially just a massive attack stat stick, but that's really all Cerydra wants anyway. In terms of substats, you will need 15 to 16 speed in substats in order to get her above 134 speed so that she can go before Branya. But other than that, you can focus all the other substats into attack. Not that you can even get attack substats on attack main stats, but for the head and hand, you can focus on attack substats. And then you can focus on speed substats on all the other main stat pieces. So that's all for my early summary on Cerydra. I think she has a really unique kit by allowing characters to double up on a skill usage, and she's definitely very strong for Phainon because she allows him to get an extra 2 meteors during his ult uptime. I'll definitely have more content on the channel covering more about Cerydra, especially once I get hands-on testing with her, so make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up with more Cerydra content. There will definitely be lots of guides on the way, not just for Cerydra and how she synergizes with Phainon, but for how Cerydra synergizes with other characters in general, such as Anaxa. Again, I still have a lot of personal testing to do with the character. If you liked the video and you found it enjoyable or helpful, please consider liking and comment down below your thoughts on Cerydra's kit. Are you disappointed that she doesn't give unique buffs to Phainon? Or are you super hyped to see Phainon chucking 5 meteors at E0 instead of only 3 meteors? Personally, I was initially a little disappointed with Cerydra, but I've warmed up on her a lot after mapping out her rotations and seeing how much she affects Phainon. Trust me, the 2 extra meteors are going to be huge. So let's all get hyped for the queen and how she's going to buff our king. Until next time!